Had some great support for the startup for this program. We've got a single row harvester. It's about the size of a rototiller, but when we select all these lines based on all the characteristics we want, we're gonna take that seed and go to a yield trial with it. So we've got a binder. It's just like the old pole type corn harvesters, where it'll bind all this up, tie it in a knot, and kick it off to the side. So we automated it. The old-fashioned way is really hard on the back. So that hasn't changed for 10,000 years that way. So right over here we've got kind of an older variety, just to show some of the evolution in the program. This is a sibline. Has anyone ever grown D8006? This is Red Amber, which is a sibline of that. Same pedigree, same parentage. It's a little bit later. It's somewhat taller than I would like. But you can see the difference between that variety and this more contemporary variety, Red Ruby. How many of you have grown Red Ruby this year? Okay, so it's fairly popular variety. There's about 500,000 acres out there. So if any of you are growing it, it's got to be significant. Anyway, I'd like to point out that you can see these berries are very much further developed on this variety here. So there's a couple of factors there: faster grain fill and flowering date. So Red Ruby flowers much earlier, 4 to 5 days earlier than an older variety like Red Amber. And so you hear about countries like the United Kingdom, Germany, and even places like out in the Pacific Northwest, like Oregon, getting 150 bushel yields. Part of that is the extended grain fill period. We have very cool temperatures here, adequate moisture. And so when you get a variety that's flowering a few days earlier, it has a head start on the grain fill period. So there was a correlation, a negative correlation between flowering date and grain fill period just in the trial data from last year, where earlier flowering lines tended to yield. It wasn't certain every time, but they tended to yield higher. Early varieties tended to yield higher. So part of the selection that we apply to our breeding nurseries is for earliness. So if you can plant soybeans, then your wheat should be heading at that time. You know, that's kind of a safe estimate on maturity selection. But as you can see, there are differences in maturities. So that's kind of another consideration to look at when you sit down to think about what varieties you're going to plant for next year. That's something to take into consideration, and the amount of acreage that you have. Farmers are great at managing risk and spreading risk, and so part of a way to do that is to spread the maturities of your variety. So you could have a variety that flowers early, that reaches maturity and an adequate percent moisture earlier than a variety that's planted on another few hundred acres. So that's one way to spread your risk, is with different maturities of your varieties. So not all varieties are created equal. And well, just as not all varieties are identical for different traits. And so not all farms are identical. So I want to say that it's you know, the decision is up to the growers too. And you know, I know change is always hard, and but sometimes change is good. There's some varieties like Hopewell, an old red wheat, AC Mountain, an older white wheat, that still have exceptional yield potential. They're consistent across years. But there are some new racehorse type varieties that if we want to move our state average up to 80, 90 bushels, you know, it's okay to so it's less of a risk to take one variety, few bags of seed, just try it out. Most of you probably have yield monitors on your combines. You can get accurate data on you know, and knowing which section of your fields you're planting your new test variety. So it would be a good practice to try some new varieties on a certain portion of your farm to see how well they perform, because not all varieties perform the same in all environments, and you want what's best for your farm then.